This is News Fighters, where we fight the news so you don't have to.
Hello everyone, welcome to News Fighters for today, Tuesday, February 26, 2019. I'm your host, Dylan Bain. Let's get to the big story of the day. Out-of-touch white millionaires going on stage to talk about things they know nothing about.
It's Oscars Day here in Hollywood.
No, I'm not talking about the Oscars. I was talking about...
Prime Minister Scott Morrison has unveiled a $2 billion package aimed at tackling climate change. It's called the Climate Solutions Fund and involves the government partnering with farmers, local businesses and communities.
Sorry, how much is that costing?
$2 billion over the next 10 years.
Average $200 million per year over a decade.
Only $200 million a year? Well, that won't even cover their travel expenses if they're booked with Hello World. But anyway, how will the scheme work?
Taxpayer funds for farmers, business, local governments who spend on energy efficiency, revegetation, forest protection and other projects meant to reduce emissions.
It all sounds a little familiar. Where have I heard this before?
Now, the government has named the policy the Climate Solutions Fund, but it is a continuation of the existing emission reduction fund started by Tony Abbott.
Oh, that's right. Tony Abbott's highly successful climate scheme. In fact, the coalition's climate policy since then has been so successful that according to ScoMo, they didn't even need to make this announcement.
We are meeting and exceeding our carbon emission reductions targets that we set for ourselves right now.
Because I guess that would make people wonder why we do need to spend another $2 billion to get there, because you've said in the past, as you've said now, that we will meet those Paris targets by 2030, and you've used the language in a canter. So why do we need to do this spending?
And we will, Deb. Well, Deb, I always knew that we were going to put these policies in place.
Okay, so we're meeting our targets because the government always magically knew that on this day in 2019, Scott Morrison was going to announce this $2 billion in funding. Makes sense. But still, the skeptics couldn't be kept at bay. Over on Sky News, independent MP for Wentworth, Karen Phelps, was worried this money might go towards more coal.
Let's just see, in practical terms, whether this money is going into more coal-fired power stations, as the Emissions Reduction Fund recently put money into.
Yes, but don't worry, coal fans. ScoMo told Sky News' Laura J there will be new money for coal. It just won't be from this money.
So there won't be any funding from this to go to underwriting of new coal. That money will be found elsewhere, and I imagine you'll require legislation.
Well, that's a separate process which continues to be underway.
The whole thing really didn't impress Laura J, who tore the policy a new arsehole the size of an open-cut coal mine.
I mean, a climate solutions fund, this is just a rebadge from a Prime Minister with a marketing background. It's a climate policy you have when you don't actually have a climate policy. It's a climate policy you have when you don't have control of the Parliament. It's a policy you have when you can't bring together the two warring factions of your party. But, if you walk down the middle of the road for too long, you are going to get hit by a truck at some stage.
At this stage, I think Scott Morrison getting hit by a truck would actually be a policy that most of the electorate would get behind, am I right? Anyways, if Laura J's vehicular manslaughter-loving analogies weren't enough, commentators on the normally very conservative-friendly pro-right-wing Sky News kept ripping into the new non-policy policy. Watch Richard Dennis from the Australia Institute not just kick Chris Kenny to the curb with his answer to this Dorothy Dixer, but also all the government's claims about meeting their targets.
Surely this additional $2 billion would convince you that Australia, under these settings, will meet its Paris reduction targets by 2030.
No, there's no conjecture at all. The government's own department says that we won't come even close to meeting the targets set by Tony Abbott. The department's own forecasts say that by 2030 we'll miss Tony Abbott's targets by a long shot. The conjecture you refer to is some commentary by people who don't accept the science of climate change, and they don't even seem to accept the science of accounting principles.
Yes, it seems that Scott Morrison's speech was full of such made-up inaccuracies that even the microphone didn't want to play along.
And congratulations on your selection yesterday. So that's not our approach. It's not an approach that a sensible government...
Wow, quite a feedback solo there. Turns out it wasn't the audio equipment malfunctioning. ScoMo was just trying to cover Jimi Hendrix.
It's not an approach that a sensible government...
Anyways, onto ScoMo's speech itself. All 39 minutes of it. It felt longer than every speech at the Oscars combined. Here's how Corey Bernardi summed it up.
I just heard this yada, yada, yada from him.
ScoMo's speech was so long that he should have just yelled the same thing that Spike Lee did at the start of his Oscars speech.
Do not turn that motherfucking clock on.
Now, being a landmark environmental policy launch, ScoMo made sure to start the speech talking about the most important issues.
Now, over the past 5.5 years, our government has kept faith with our traditions of what we believe as Liberals and as Nationals to address the many tasks that were set before us when we came to government 5.5 years ago. Restoring the budget to balance from Labor's years of deficits.
Yes, that's right. The world is on fire. The ice caps are melting. Sea levels are going to rise. Species are going extinct. So now's the time we need to get together as a nation and talk about the horrible ramifications of man-made Labor deficits during the GFC. But that's not the only thing he wanted to shoehorn into his environmental speech.
Record defence spending, stronger borders, and a comprehensive plan to keep Australians safe, whether it's in the classroom for kids.
Wait. So ScoMo is saying he cares about keeping kids safe now. The same guy who said this to Alan Jones about safe schools.
Does that stuff make your skin curl? Well, it does, Alan. I don't want the values of others being imposed on my children in my school.
But in his speech, the Prime Minister did eventually get onto the Coalition's long history of environmental policy achievements.
And it was the Howard government, with Malcolm Turnbull as Environment Minister, that first tackled the vexed, and it remains vexed, issue of the Murray-Darling Basin and established the Murray-Darling Basin Authority.
And speaking of which, audience members, I hope you're enjoying your all-you-can-eat carp buffet for lunch today. Please help yourselves. Plenty more thousands of killed fish where that came from. Even former Liberal Corey Bernardi had suggestions for what ScoMo should have announced instead. But he didn't seem to be able to grasp at the finer details of environmental policy.
And what he should have done is he should have come out and said, look, I'm going to announce some environmental policies that will help us to be good stewards of the environment, and we'll have some practical outcomes about, whatever it will be for farmers and for cleaner air or whatever.
Anyways, now over to opposition leader Bill Shorten, who in his rebuttal used the trademark eloquence he's known for.
We got more renewable energy than any other continent, sun and solar power and wind power, yet somehow for an energy superpower, we become a tiny energy power instead.
Yes, Poet Laureate Bill Shorten there. And what a coincidence, Bill talking about a huge energy power mysteriously turning into a tiny energy power. Kind of like a certain party under a certain leader. But amazingly, not reflected in the latest Newspoll.
Labor maintaining a 53-47 lead after preferences.
Yes, the Coalition is 6 points behind Labor in the latest Newspoll. So, Koshi, ask ScoMo what we all want to know.
So, you honestly think you can win the next election?
Of course I do. The polls will be the polls. The West Coast was behind at half-time too, David, as you'll recall. So, the hooter goes in May at the end of the end of the session.
ScoMo, of course, whenever he panics, just starts talking about football. Of course, the better strategy might have been for him to give the same answer director Spike Lee did yesterday at the post-Oscars press conference.
Can you give us your thoughts on that Best Picture win?
Let me take another sip. Next question.
So, with 3 months of election campaigning still to go, all of Australia is probably wishing we could
get hit by a truck.
That's Newsfighters for today, Tuesday, February 26th, 2019. There'll be another Newsfighters in a few days. In the meantime, subscribe on your favourite podcasting app. Email us, podcast@newsfighters.com. Follow us on Twitter @NewsFightersPod. I'm Dylan Bain. Keep fighting, and bye for now.
This is News Fighters, where we fight the news so you don't have to.